welcome to my first ever talk on Chiron through the signs. This is part of the Eye of the Centaur, the 2023 spring reading from Planet Waves. I'm Eric Francis Coppolino, happy to be here with you, and happy to be embarking on this new kind of video presentation. Video, not my favorite modality to work in, but I'm learning. I do it. And again, our topic is Chiron through the signs. Now, this is likely to take at least 3 videos. I'm going to introduce the topic today, give some of the basics of generally what Chiron through the signs is about, and I have notes prepared out to Gemini, and then we will see where I am at to give the next one a go tomorrow. And I'm recording, by the way, on Wednesday, the 21st of February, 2024. Now, unlike most of my other talks, I'm going to work with notes. I don't usually work with notes. I reckon that once I've got a start on things, I will just be going. But there are certain points I need to make for each of these, and a couple of like essential starting points. And let's begin with the idea that you have a house placement and a sign placement of Chiron. Your sign placement is based on what year you were born, and sometimes down to what month of what year. Your reading contains this list, which is a fairly accurate, approximate. It's accurate as far as it goes, but there are approximations. And if you're born near one of the transition times of Chiron changing signs, you should cast your chart and just find out what sign and house your Chiron's in. And this can be easily done by either going to astro.com, or if you're a subscriber or one of my clients, write to me and I will tell you. So astro.com to cast your chart. So the house and sign thing works a little like this, and I'm going to be using Babe Ruth, George Herman Ruth, one of my favorite historical figures of all time, as an example. The Babe is born with Cancer rising, so that means that we begin the chart counting from the sign Cancer. He happens to have Chiron in the 4th house in Libra, but had he been born a few hours later, maybe about 6 hours later, he'd have Libra rising and Chiron in the 1st house. It would still be in Libra. So you have a house placement and a sign placement. There are some overlapping themes between house and sign placement. For example, the 3rd house will have a resonance with Gemini, but it's not exactly Gemini. I think Debbie Kempton Smith put it the best in Secrets from a Stargazer's Notebook, a very entertaining book, better than almost any website, when she said that that the sign placement is the kind of the energy field that's resonating with the planet, and the house placement is where you express that quality. So you're going to get part of the picture from me, which is going to be the sign placement, and that tells you quite a bit. In fact, it tells you plenty, and it's a very good start. And you may have insights about it, and you may have questions about it. Obviously, you'll have questions. Now, this is going to be a kind of a bit of a cursory overview. By cursory, I don't mean that it's not going to be helpful and productive, but what I mean is that the study of Chiron requires some in-depth work. And fortunately, there's a couple of really good books that will help you do that. And an astrologer in the form of me who will be able to answer your questions. I seem to be kind of the last of the generation of Chiron pioneers that I learned from. I'm kind of the 3rd generation of Chiron scholars, but the 2nd generation is mostly retired or not that accessible. So I'm accessible. I had very good training and a lot of practice. to build on the training that I had. And as I mentioned in one of the first videos, maybe the preview video, I was having a hard time reading charts and putting the whole story together until I encountered Chiron. So it provided a kind of a hinge pin. Suddenly the door could open and not fall off the hinges. And halfway through Barbara Hand Clow's book, I was able to read charts. And it wasn't because of everything I learned from the book. It was about something that she pointed out that I could tune into, and then I could do it. So let's talk about Chiron through the signs. So first of all, Chiron in any sign creates a focus or emphasis on that sign that may be as intensive as your sun sign, your moon sign, or your rising sign. It's kind of an extra sign that you have where there is going to be a very high degree of concentration of energy and potentially a concentration of power and ability. And this power and ability usually comes from some kind of a persistent crisis crisis or critical matter that emerges over and over again in life. And so if you're doing the work of Chiron, you're building on Chiron, and you're slowly kind of climbing your way up, through dimensions of awareness, and really Chiron is about depth, actually, more than anything. So it allows, kind of guides you inward. One way to think of Chiron is as a kind of very bright light that shines within your horoscope and can be read as this very, very intensive point of awareness. The house is an important mode of expression for the planet, whatever sign it's in. So make sure that if you're curious about the subject, make sure that you have some sense of that. I'll be going through the houses in the 12 sign part of the reading, where I'm talking about the house where Aries occupies in all the solar charts, and that will give you a sense of Chiron's expression by house. We'll be talking about Aries in all those cases, and we'll begin with Aries in a few minutes as Chiron through these signs. But the 12 sign readings will give you a clue about the expression of Chiron by house. It kind of completes the sentence. One thing I've noticed about Chiron is that it has a way of turning astrological statements into questions. So you can almost take any sign definition and then stick a question mark on it to represent Chiron, because it is going to invert something about that sign. It's going to also intensify an expression in such a way that may contradict the normal expression of that sign, for example. So in the example of Gemini, can have often has a very quick wit, anything associated with Gemini, but put Chiron there and it adds a kind of a doubt about that. It reframes the mercurial quick-wittedness of Chiron as something that is, first of all, slowed down. That's very important, that Chiron will tend to slow things down for a while till it emerges. And it will, I think, bring up many of the qualities of a sign that are not the usual ones. They're not the ones that are more often talked about. They're more of the ones that represent a kind of a cryptic side of the sign that Chiron will be there to help you decrypt. And I'll do my best to give examples of this as I go through the signs in this video and the next ones. The next is that in addition to the house and the sign, the aspect pattern is very important to study if you want to understand the expression of your Chiron. And that expression is intensified by contact with inner planets. That really is the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. there are definitely intensified expressions when Chiron is aspecting Jupiter or something like this, or Saturn or Pluto. But to really make Chiron personal, it helps to have the contact with personal planets, with inner planets. And in the alternate, Chiron placed very strongly upon an angle, the ascendant, the descendant, the MC, the IC will also bring Chiron more closely into personal individual awareness. So people can have more or less Chiron in their chart, which really means more or less of that specific kind of consciousness we're talking about with Chiron, depending upon the placement. And there are sometimes people who understand this kind of consciousness exists and they want it. And so then it's the astrologer's job to kind of weave Chiron into the story of their chart using aspects and using transits and showing the client when Chiron was active and what it felt like. And this often feels like a special intensity at that time in the client's life that cannot really be attributed to anything else. And intensity is one way to describe it, but there's also high focus and kind of a critical moment of choice or decision. As regards the wounding aspect, you'll hear a lot of people describe Chiron as the wounded healer. For me, those are cautionary words that reveal that the person really hasn't been doing any of their own thinking. They just kind of regurgitate that if they haven't really thought it through for themselves. What's actually going on with the wounding property of Chiron is that there is potentially some traumatic event associated with Chiron, a persistent condition that you could somehow attribute to the description of Chiron's placement, and that leads to the need to repair or fix or compensate for or build on or grow that. And then the very unusual properties of Chiron, the very outstanding properties of Chiron can manifest. Okay, so that is to say that where you have Chiron by house and sign, there's likely to be something that is outstanding about you, but on the other hand, it may be something that you deeply doubt about yourself and are not sure of. And that doubt is part of what feeds the process of building the emphasis that Chiron will have. So it's kind of a standing wave pattern in the chart. And when planets encounter that standing wave pattern, there are interesting results. That includes any planet making a transit to Chiron, including and especially Chiron making transits to its own natal position. And from time to time, I'll make reference to that. One thing about Chiron's position in the solar system is this is an approximate orbit. It's from Melanie Reinhardt's book To the Edge and Beyond. And what you can see here is that Chiron has this kind of odd-shaped, Chiron is this one right here, this odd-shaped orbit that grazes Uranus. And I have not really sorted this out yet, but it seems to it goes through Aries and Pisces longer than Uranus goes through a sign. But it's only said to be a Uranus grazer. This is a technical point. In reality, as is currently happening, Chiron moves more slowly than Uranus, and so it's fully in outer planet mode. And then when it gets here, and I'm pretty sure that these two intersection points are in Gemini and Sagittarius, but I will have that sorted out. Chiron crosses into the orbit of Saturn and is said to behave more like an inner planet. Now, because of this loop going way out to the orbit of Uranus, we get a strange effect, which is out at this end, Chiron takes about 9 years to go through a sign. That would be Aries the longest, and it takes 18 months to go through a sign. That would be Libra the shortest. And so this is two very different Chirons in one sense, but what I have found is that really it's better to not generalize, and it's better to study your Chiron transits. I don't have an efficient way to figure those out for a lot of people. If I had a really competent astrology assistant, I could do that, and I could train someone. It would take a couple of months to train someone how to do this, but I could turn out a lot of kind of Chiron transit schedules for people efficiently, and it's not the kind of thing that a computer can do, because you have to look at the chart and see what's going on and understand it in a way that an algorithm is just not going to comprehend. This is outside the realm of what's possible for any form of artificial intelligence. Now, another diagram that explains the orbit of Chiron, this is from Barber's book, is that you can see here that when Chiron is close to the sun, it goes through these signs very, very quickly. This is not drawn exactly to scale, but it's not bad. I think that Sag and Cap are a little bit more, well, I would need to look more carefully, but this Cap is about 4 years. Taurus is about 7 years. And then Aries about 9, Pisces about 8, and Aquarius about 7 years in each sign. Now, there's a few planets that do this. It's a function of the perihelion effect, where Chiron being a comet in a cometary orbit, long, well, not long, short, kind of medium period cometary orbit, swoops in close to the sun, and you get this effect. So most people in the world have Chiron either in Aries and Taurus, or Pisces, Aquarius and Capricorn. This is the vast majority of people have Chiron in five signs, and then the other 7 account for everyone else. One last bit as a point of introduction. One of the distinguishing factors of Chiron as inner versus outer is when you have certain key life transits. And so if you're born with Chiron fast, like for example, moving through Cancer, you will have your first Chiron square at age 7. If you're born like I am with Chiron in Pisces, you'll have your first Chiron square at around age 22, and it could be as late as age 23. This chart is from Barbara Hand Clough's book. I don't think it's exactly right. I think that this this Aries part needs to come up higher, but the idea is the same. That if you're born with Chiron in Aries, you're going to have your first square at around age 19, and in Taurus at younger at age 11. But if we come out here to the slow side again, you're going to have the transits much later. I'm not fully trusting of this diagram, though. I think it probably needs to be redone, but you get the idea that the wide variance of age of transits is part of what defines the Chiron experience. And the thing about Chiron and studying the transits is that it reveals a kind of a hidden cycle in the chart, which varies quite substantially by the age that you were, by the year that you were born, and therefore the age where you start having these transits. Conversely, Saturn moves through the signs like clockwork. Uranus moves through the signs like clockwork. They're practically circular orbits. They're highly dependable orbits, and they will average out to being the same number of days in each sign over a couple of orbits. Whereas with Chiron, it is radically different, to the point where it creates a generational effect. And part of that generational effect is that we tend to have certain very important things in common with our grandparents that we don't have in common with our parents, because typically most people are born when their parents are around age 25-ish on average. But their grandparents are often born at age, you know, they're not born. The grandchild is born when the grandparent is around 50 years old. And so that means that you're much, much more likely to have a common Chiron cycle with your grandparents, who will understand the nature of what certain developmental stages mean. And really, to have your first Chiron square goes 90 degrees from your place of birth, is very, at age 7, is very different from having it at age 22. You have much more volition and agency at age 22 than you do at age 7. And of course, you're much more vulnerable at age 7 than you are at age 22, much more subject to the choices of the adults around you at age 7. And so it creates very, very different experiences. And these must be looked up basically by hand, because the Chiron transits can be printed out by any transit finder and any astrology program. But there are other transits that are very specific to the time of your birth, including transits to angles and the moon and the sun and other planets like that. One last thing while we're on the subject of introducing. The Chiron aspect pattern is very important to understand. Now we're getting into the level of, I would say, serious amateur astrology. And really the only difference between serious amateur astrology and professional astrology is going to be the number of people that you've worked with. And so the more people you've worked with, the better sense you're likely to have of what Chiron is doing, or any planet. But I want to give you an idea of what I mean by an aspect structure. So here we have Babe Ruth chart, absolutely perfect chart for who Babe Ruth was. And this chart, when was he born? February 6th. So he just passed his birthday. This chart deserves a thorough reading, and maybe with a little bit of baseball astrology mixed in. But here's Chiron. Down in the 4th, Babe has Cancer rising, moon in Cancer. This describes the sheer popularity, this emotional passion that people had, and his kind of stature as a kind of a cosmic mama. I mean, he had paternal energy, but there's something, I think, very maternal about Babe Ruth, and we see that in Cancer. But he's got Chiron down here in the 4th, and then all of these lines that I've drawn in, not the lines in the middle, because the ones I put in the middle are the weird aspects, quintessile and the sesquiquadrate and the semi-square that are not easy to see with your eyes. But something like a square is easy to see. So I can never do this right. This backwards thing, it's like, okay, so Chiron is, for example, the moon is square Chiron. You can see that in this line here. And I'll scan this chart. Chiron's also square Juno. So Chiron is adding its emphasis into the moon and into Juno. I don't know about Babe Ruth's marital life, but it's also talking to Pluto up here. See that orange line connecting that? That's like a 2-3 degree aspect. And it's also talking to these planets up here in the 9th house. And so it looks like the 10th, but really, well, depends on your house theory. But water to water, water ascendant, water up there, that's a 9th house thing going on. And he was kind of a mystic in a way. I mean, he was born in the age of spiritualism in 1895, and the guy could use as bad as a divining rod. point point where he was going to hit that ball out of the park and probably decide whose windshield it was going to hit. In the dead ball era, when the balls were